Hey everybody, I just wanted to give a quick overview of how I look at work and how I would change some of the stuff of the submissions that I'm receiving. So first off, I noticed that the scenes folder has a prefab and scripts folder inside of it. That is not good as a developer because a prefab and a script are not a scene, so they should really be at top level if it's organized like this. So I'd recommend having these on the outside up here. So let's pop into the sample scene. Another note would be I'd probably change the name sample scene to being representative of what your project is. So maybe in this case, I believe it was called Run Doggo Run, and maybe I'd call it run doggo run underscore main, or I just call it main.scene, something along those lines. Sample scene just it isn't indicative of what's inside. Okay, I guess it is a sample in this particular case, but whatever. So some things that I noticed when looking at this scene is depending on the resolution of the screen. You know, if I was a phone that had this resolution, maybe it starts to break down a bit, and it really breaks down when I'm looking at it from different waves. It breaks down less if I'm in a larger resolution, like a 1080 by 1920, which is an iPhone 11. But if you're on an iPhone 8 or below, it'd look more like this. And we're trying to make these in ways where it looks kind of nice on whatever you open it up on. Now, the first step you can take toward this goal is on the canvas itself. You make sure that you say scale with screen size on this element over here. And let me just make sure my window capture 4, no, window, boom. Hey, okay, I fixed it. Fixed it before it was a problem. Okay, so make sure that your whatever resolution you start sizing in, you then transfer over here. So I think it looked good when it was what was it, 1080 by 1920? Is that what it was? 1080 by 1920? Let's go back to game. Yeah, 1080 by 1920. So now when I press play, you'll notice already, since I have it scale with that size regardless of where it is, it looks better, right? So that's a start. Now let me do free aspect again, boom, and see how it breaks down now that we have some level of consistency. So the button will scale to an extent with where I am on the screen, but you know, at a certain size, still it breaks down. You know, if I turned it landscape, you know, maybe, boom, I've turned my phone to the side. So let's say I'm actually now looking at it from 1920 by 1080. Boom. So if I've turned my phone to the side, it no longer works. I know many games lock you to a particular aspect. I'm just giving examples of how it could break down and what to be mindful of. So how do we make things look good no matter who's messing around with it, you know, whatever artist opens it up? So let's pop into the scene and just talk about it. I'll use one panel as an example, but then you can apply that to all of them. So, boom. My first observation is let's do it on the main menu panel. That's it has start and select on it, I believe. Oh, new game and continue. So the first observation I saw was the image here is the whole enchiladas, the whole thing. And that's not necessarily good. You probably want to have a static color in your background. So public image, and I'll set it to be the color of this. And then I set it to be the full size. I'm holding Alt and Shift, by the way, to do this and set it to the full size of the screen. It just saves me a little bit of time. If I hit the corner without holding the buttons, then I'd have to zero these out up here. And then I drag it to the back so that it is in the background. I name it BG. Because the problem was, I'll put it here because this is really the FG. The problem is that the main menu name there, it's not really a background. It's, you know, it's a part of the composition. So I'm not sure I would be comfortable calling it background, and I'm not sure I'd be comfortable tying it in with the rest of the piece. So you could do something like have a separate main menu PNG and a paw print PNG. You can then use the paw print in as many places as you want without having to make a whole new image. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is you can have less resources taken up overall because you're saving space, because you're not saving a huge image for your background. You just have two little things, and then you just set a background color to something default without an image at all. So that's a benefit. So the next step is setting that the foreground main menu to not stretch out. So I'm going to say preserve aspect. And the reason that you need that background is because before you would have actually had like a background where there's nothing, which would have not been great. So that's why you need that background to have the color, so that the text on that texture doesn't get all stretchy and the little paw print doesn't get all stretchy. So now in the main menu foreground, I'm going to create an empty object, and we actually want to lay out the buttons automatically so that regardless of the size, it doesn't matter. It'll always look good. It doesn't like start breaking down depending on the resolution. So that's called a vertical layout group. So I'm going to say layout underscore buttons, just because it's going to lay out the buttons. How big do I want it to be? I probably want it to go around here like this. So I'm going to say from point to point 8, and from point 1 to point 2 to point 7 looks about right. I don't want it to get into that main menu section. I don't ever want to risk it. So boom, 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 and boom. I set all those to 0, and now we have a nice little space to play with. I'm going to put the buttons inside there. And a vertical layout group will automatically arrange these elements vertically and set them up to scale to the container. So boom, they scaled to the container all right. Next thing you want to do is make sure these images don't get all stretchy. So I'm going to say preserve aspect. And then I'm going to want to, I could do it two ways. I don't want them to take up the whole space. So you see how, let me shrink down a bit. Go to my game scene. So they're still gonna see. Let me just double check that that's true. Let me press play. Did it play? There it goes. Let me just make sure that it's still, yep, oh, no. Okay, so it's because I saved. So now, no matter how big I get, you know, they don't exceed, they don't ever cross over to each other. But it also looks kind of ugly because, like, why are they that big? So there's a couple things to do from this point. The first thing is to kind of make them in a row. So I'd like them to be laid out upper center, and I don't want to force child expand the height so that they kind of just take on whatever size they want. Boom, boom. And then now I can keep adding in new buttons. Boom. Let's press play. Let's see how this feels. A little better. Little better. Then I can add these, go in here and say layout. I believe I want a layout element. And I can say preferred height if we wanted. Boom. And I could give it something like, I don't know. If I did 50, it'd be that small. If I did 100 to 200, that's a preferred height, so it doesn't need to be there. Let's press play. I hovered over those two elements, by the way. So now you'll notice that this image here, depending on the size, let's investigate why that is happening. I'm going to pop over here. I mean, you'll never really have your screen that small, so it's not really a fair comparison. I'm just trying to see if I can emulate that free aspect. Shrink down. So how do we get around that type of issue? What I'd probably do, mind that I'm not actually editing in the, what do you call it? In the prefab. But what I'd probably do, I assume that if I were to set the pivot of instead of in my middle, if I set it to the top, would that fix it? Yeah. Yeah. So I set its pivot to being on its topmost point instead of its middle. So now probably won't be perfect, but it will be less crazy. So now no matter what I open it on, you know, it'll never fully break down. You can obviously mess around with it all day, get it looking as good as you want, but these are the first tips and tricks, you know, in 10 minutes or less to make sure that your buttons don't get too crazy. The other recommendation I'd have is having a single button texture with no text on it and using that across all these, and then adding the text in by right-clicking UI text and typing in the text there and setting it up however you want per button. That way you don't need an individual texture for each button. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I'll talk to you all later.